You know, to anyone listening, I think this conversation really speaks to the power of, women taking a stand for themselves, for our mental health, for our careers, for our relationships, and saying we deserve better. We deserve a life that we are in control of rather than life just happening to us. And for us, that meant removing alcohol and addressing why we drank in the first place, but I would hope anyone listening can, maybe that could be the takeaway of just like what subtle shifts can you make in your life to honor yourself, to use your voice, to get in touch with your real courage, not liquid courage. What's that thing you've always wanted to do one day? You know, do it. Do it. Just
Don't
like
wait. Don't wait.
just do it. I saw this beautiful meme. It was like on one side it was this person like daydreaming and it said one day, and then on the other side it said day one, and it was her actually doing the thing. And I just thought that subtle shift of like you're not just going to all of a sudden have a book written. You have to open up Google Docs. You have to write a whole bunch of like really horrible drafts, and find an agent and then write a proposal. Like there's just so many steps. And like we said at the beginning, I faced so much rejection. I had so many no's. So many people passed on this book, but I had one editor who really believed in it. And that's all you need. You need that one yes.
Welcome to the Sober Edge podcast, inspiration for alcohol-free living. I'm your host, Terry Patterson, functional nutritionist and This Naked Mind senior coach. The Sober Edge is a place to explore the infinite possibilities on the other side of drinking. In a culture soaked in booze, discover the wonder and joy of taking a different path. Meet real people living lives of purpose and passion. Learn the truth behind the alcohol myths and get ready to be motivated, inspired, and astounded by what is possible with the Sober Edge. You're listening to episode 135 of the Sober Edge podcast. Well, welcome to today's episode. I am very excited to introduce you to my lovely guest, Tawny Lara. Tawny Lara is the author of Dry Humping, a guide to dating, relating, and hooking up without the booze, co-host of the Recovery Rocks podcast, and co-founder of the vinegar-based botanical beverage Parentheses. Tawny talks in this interview about her passion for women and mental health, and she really is honest and real about what it takes to do this work. And as I like to say, it's work worth doing. But really, Tawny talks about it's hard to become sober. It's hard to become a published author. It's hard to put a product out in the world. And yet we get to show up in this life after alcohol, and we get to follow our heart and follow our passions. And I'm just so delighted that there is a Tawny Lara in the world who encourages all of us, who shows up with passion and purpose and dedication and shows us how to grind it out in ways that help us show up with more courage, be more brave, and have more fun. So I think you're going to hear Tawny and I have a lot of fun in this episode. She's got some special things coming up, including a link to her new writing workshop that's happening in May. So there's a link to that in the show notes. And you're just going to hear this conversation about all of the ways that Tawny is showing up in the world. And I hope you enjoy it. Well, hey, everyone, it's Terry back with another edition of the Sober Edge podcast. And this is an episode that I have been looking forward to hitting record on for a while. So today I get to bring into the Sober Edge world a beautiful human who has been exploring so much in this side of recovery. And Tawny Lara is an author. She is a product inventor, creator. She has her own podcast and just is someone who has been so generous in sharing your gifts with the world. And Living Your Recovery Out Loud. So, welcome to the podcast, Tawny.
Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to see you again.
Yes, we actually met because you generously came into the Sober Edge Book Club and shared about your book and got so many of our members inspired about dry humping, a guide to, living and dating in this world where we're no longer drinking. And we had such a great conversation in the book club. So tell us a little bit, let's start there. Tell us a little bit about the book, what prompted you to write the book, the title, and what has been the response since it came out, I think, in October. Is that correct?
Terry, today is 6 months since the book came out. Can you believe it?
Wow.
Truly wild. Um, yeah, September 19th was like in my head for over a year. I was like, this is the day. And now it's 6 months later. It's nuts. Um, yeah, I mean, I wrote this book. I wrote Dry Humping because I had no idea how to date, let alone hook up without alcohol. So, when I got sober at 29 and the majority of my 20s, I was a bartending party girl fueled by drunken hookups and drunken relationships and toxic relationships. Um, where there was a lot of people pleasing, a lot of putting other people's pleasure in front of my own. And so I wrote this book. Yes, it's a recovery resource, but it's also a resource on sexual liberation, on sexual empowerment, empowering women to get to know their bodies. But it's all written through a lens of you don't need alcohol to feel sexually liberated. And, I'm in recovery. I don't drink, but the book is actually written through a sober, curious lens. So everyone can sit at the table. You don't have to give up alcohol to have good sex, but I like to say that you do need to. I think everyone could benefit from being more mindful in the bedroom, being more intentional with your relationship with sex and alcohol. Um, so, it's it's a journalistic book. It's researched. You hear my story goes throughout the book, but it's mostly, research. I interviewed sober people, sober curious people, doctors, neurologists, um, sex educators, sex therapists, um, really trying to figure out why we're all so obsessed with liquid courage and but specifically how that intersects with sex and dating.
I just love this book because it's such an important offer in our own personal journey to figuring out where we get stuck when we think about not drinking. And it certainly was part of my own journey. I was fortunate to be in a long-term relationship. I've been married, my husband and I, we're going to celebrate, can't remember if it's 41 or 42 years this year, but we have been married a
You
long
don't
time.
you don't look old enough to be married for 42 years. Holy shit.
Yeah, well, I think I'm aging in reverse with the not drinking thing, Tawny.
Yes.
We all do.
You look amazing.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And my oldest daughter is going to turn 40 next week, so it's a real
Wow.
But, I was 55 when I stopped drinking, and I wasn't really thinking about sex and hooking up, but it certainly was something that came up in my journey to alcohol freedom. And there was a
Mm.
lot of barriers to, what do I want to have sex? What do I do with my partner? How does this look? Even though we knew each other well, we had been using alcohol as a social lubricant, sexual lubricant, if you will, in the bedroom forever. And I think that what your book does is it allows us to all come to this common place of having this conversation, exploring what is true and what is not true, and really unpacking the myths that we have around what sex without alcohol really looks like.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought up the fact that you were in a relationship when you got sober and even read the book, because a lot of people I've learned through my book tour and just having the book out for 6 months, I've heard like, oh, I'm not dating anymore. I would love to read your book, but I'm not dating. And I, it, as you know, the book is structured where, the first third is about dating and being single, the middle is about sex, and the last third is about being in a relationship. It is about communication and setting boundaries. There's even a chapter about sober breakups, how to handle grief and losing a loved one, um, when you're not drinking alcohol, or while you're drinking less alcohol, so it really is a book about relationships, not just dating. It's, and even you could zoom out, it's about how to be a better sibling, a better daughter, a better, just really how to improve your interpersonal relationships.
Yeah, and I think I just had a podcast conversation with someone yesterday, and she asked me what was the biggest change on the other side of not drinking. And I said, it is relationships. It's the ability to get honest with ourselves. And Tawny, after you came into the book club, we had some follow-up conversations around what you shared and the book. And what came up was the the place where women have, most women shared in that context that they had never had sex without alcohol, even their very first time. And that was true
Hmm.
with my experience. I was 16 years old. There was some drinking involved. And it was a good experience overall. Not that I was necessarily ready, but it wasn't a traumatic experience. But sex after that always involved alcohol. And so when we break up with alcohol and we explore this part of our understanding of our own sexuality, our own freedom, giving permission, all of this is just a lot to really discover about ourselves. And I think it's one of the most beautiful things about your book is it gives us permission to go through that work.
Thank you for saying that. I know exactly what you mean, with the stuff that can come up after having a conversation like we had in your book club. I've sat in on several book clubs. I went on a book tour and I talked to readers, and I've done, like I said, extensive research, and I've talked to hundreds of people, mostly women and mostly queer people, about exactly what you're talking about. And the consensus is really just like people seem to be grateful that I'm holding space for this type of conversation. Not even that, even if you don't even read the book, but it's like, oh, sober sex is a thing, it's an option, even just raising awareness to alcohol-free date ideas, boundary setting, advocating for your own pleasure. You don't need to be sober to incorporate these lessons into your life.
So, what do you think from your research, Tawny, is the biggest myth that people have about sober sex?
I think, if I could zoom out a bit, I think it all comes from liquid courage. And I think it's, we think drunk sex is better. We think we need alcohol on a date to be more relaxed or to feel more comfortable or more confident. And in the book, I compare it to Dumbo, where he thinks he needs this feather to fly, and then he learns he can fly without the feather. So it's kind of like that, where, if you've been having sex with training wheels this whole time, then the thought of doing it without can be really, really scary. So I think it's this misnomer that we need alcohol to feel sexually liberated. When we don't, we have that courage in us, within us already. It's really, we allow alcohol to activate it. We allow alcohol to give us this pseudo confidence to maybe ask for what we want in the bedroom, or to be more assertive, or whatever. We all used alcohol for different reasons, but the essence of my work is really just reminding people that that desire is innately in you already. You used alcohol to access it in the past, here are some other ways to access that innate courage.
Yeah, I think courage is such a huge part of this, and the courage to allow that we can be uncomfortable and still keep going. We can still keep exploring what it looks like to work through this discomfort. And it doesn't end. Like, not drinking doesn't mean you'll never have sex again. It's not, that's just not a foregone conclusion. It's kind of like the myths around, well, I'm going to stop drinking and I have to get all new friends. And that wasn't my experience either. And so I think
Yeah,
that,
same.
yeah, I think we really need to just cut through the noise around what we think we know and explore what really is.
I love that. You got to write that down. Like, that was good.
I'm glad we're recording. I'll have it forever. So I want to switch gears a little bit because you've been in this place where you were a journalist before. Is that accurate? Yeah. So
Yeah.
writing a book wasn't necessarily outside of what you had been exploring and the writings that you'd done. And, like you probably had certain successes and certain disappointments and even rejections in your journalistic career. But you wrote an article recently about a month ago, and it's entitled, let me see if I get it right, Postpartum Publishing, or it explores postpartum publishing. And you talk a little bit about the huge impact that putting a book baby out in the world
Mhm.
have on, the parallels between recovery, thinking about your own neurotransmitters and, the health of your mental health. And you really share vulnerably that this is a big deal to get a book out. And some of the things that I think you shared that came up for you is this rejection or what it means, what we make it mean. So tell us about that
Mm.
article and what you discovered and where you are now in the process of figuring out what it means to be a published author.
I love this question because, like you said, that article just came out about a month ago. So I really haven't um, talked about it I think this might be the first time I've talked about it on a podcast other than my own. So, um, when several of my friends in the publishing space, fellow authors, kindly warned me that, you might hit a post-publishing slump or a depression, or, there's so much buildup and then it's out there and it's pretty anticlimactic. It's like once the initial stuff wears off, like seeing your book in a bookstore for the first time, going on podcasts, going on book tour, doing all these like really huge things, and then they end. And then it's like, now what? And so I'm really grateful that I was warned that this was a possibility. Um, and I think just as a journalist, but also as a person in recovery, I've learned that asking for help is the only way I can get through certain things. So I texted other author friends like, um, I'm struggling with this. Did you deal with this? How did you deal with this? And the more I talked to other people and once I was actually going through this post publishing depression, um, I was like, I think this is an article. I think this is something people need to know about. So I pitched it to Literary Hub, this online literary magazine, and they published it, thankfully, and I got a lot of good feedback from it. Other authors telling me that they felt seen by it. Other authors first time authors whose books are not quite out yet thanked me like this is helpful. Now I know how to prepare. So, it's its own publishing a book is its own journey. It's its own recovery story. And I don't think people realize that writing is work. It's a job, it's a career. Um, I don't think people realize that I don't want to say like the entertainment industry, because I guess it is technically the entertainment industry, but like people don't people don't really think that acting is work or singing is work, or they're like, oh God, I want to be in movies. And then it's like, it's a lot. I experienced, and the reason I bring that up is because I had actor friends who read that article, and they're like, this is what happened when my first movie came out. This is so it's like, and I didn't even think about that. I didn't even think about that parallel because it's just not my world. But I really wanted to humanize the book writing experience and show that it is work. It is a great deal of work. It is probably, other than getting sober, I think writing a book was probably the hardest thing I've ever done. Um, and I will totally do it again.
Yeah.
But I really, like, my work. I love to raise awareness and destigmatize. So I feel like this article was a way to do that. Like, this is a thing that happens to authors. We get really depressed when the book comes out because it's done. And it's okay. And we'll get through it. We'll get through that one day at a time too.
Yeah, and I loved that you did, kind of talk about the impact on mental health and some of the parallels that you drew between being in recovery and early stages of recovery and understanding one day at a time that things get better, that awareness builds, that we come out the other side. And so I think what you said there that's so beautiful and powerful and really frames your work, Tawny, is the humanizing
Mm.
this journey. And that's what you did with the book in the first place. And now you are continuing to bring this process of how we live our life into the forefront. And so I think that's so exciting. And I think it's such a gift to other authors because I've been so privileged to have many of our colleagues in this, sober author space come into the book club. I've talked to Meg Guswide. I've talked to Amanda Kuda. I've talked to Brooke Scheller. And we've had this beautiful conversation around, wow, your book is out in the world. But there is almost this dark side that the public doesn't see. And I think one thing you mentioned in your article that was really interesting to me is, yeah, your great aunt so and so thinks you're out there raking in the bucks, and it's all just gravy, and it's just not necessarily true. I had one of the authors I just mentioned say, like, writing a book is not necessarily a moneymaker.
It's not, and I shout that from the rooftops as often as I can. Um, I've, realistically, I think I've probably spent more money on writing this book than I've made from it. I went the traditional publishing route. I got an advance. It was a very small advance, and hopefully I can earn royalties. But when you think about, it took me years to write this and research this, um, and take classes to learn even how to write a book. How do I write a book proposal? I had to teach myself all of this stuff, and that all costs money. So, um, I'm teaching a book proposal class in May. It's coming up, and I work with people one on one to help them write book proposals. And the first thing I tell them, do not write a book if you think it's going to help you make money in it quickly. It's not. It is very, very rare to be a rich author. It is like, if you're a rich author, you have money coming from somewhere else. I worked a day job up until a year ago. I had to work a full-time day job while writing and researching this book. And I don't think people understand that. So, and because people don't talk about it, authors don't talk about it enough. So I'm happy to talk about it because I think it's important for people to know.
Yeah, and you and I talked before I hit record, I see a lot of people in my community that one of the most beautiful things about becoming alcohol free is the world can really open up. And often I see the men and women that I work with, they want to give back in some ways. And sometimes for many of them, they feel like they have a book inside of them. And I think it's really important to set the expectation in a way that is has truth in it, has the bold truth in it, so that people are realistic about when
Mhm.
to go on this journey, why they go on this journey of becoming a published author, what it means, and what it will look like, and, what happens after the book is out in the world. So,
Exactly, and it's, a lot of people, like you said, they're like, "I wanna write a book," and it's like, "Do you want to write a book, or would you like to have written a book?" Those are 2 very, very different things, and it's also, do you wanna go the traditional publishing route? Because that's gonna take years. Do you wanna go to the self-publishing route? Because that's very expensive. So, it's people people don't know what all goes into writing a book. Like I said, it's work. It is the hardest I've worked on anything in my life besides my recovery. Um, and they I saw this tweet that said like writers are we've chosen a career where we're basically just doing homework all day. It's like, yeah, like I literally write essays for a living.
yes, maybe
I've
that's
chosen
why.
this.
Maybe that's why I told you, I don't have a book inside of me. I am not interested in writing a book. It's kind of like when I wanted to try quilting, and then I tried quilting, and halfway through making a quilt, I was like, "No one told me it was math. I don't like math. Like, what this is not a creative, beautiful process." And I didn't want to quilt. I just wanted to have made a quilt. So I think that's an
Yes.
important point. Yeah.
That's a really good point. And it's like, I when I work with people one on one who are like, I want to write a book, I'm working on my book proposal, I ask them, why a book? Because could it be, maybe you have an essay in you. Maybe you want to start a podcast. Maybe you just want to bring people together and you need to host local events in your community. There's so many ways that you can share your story and give back to the recovery community. It doesn't have to be in a book. I would actually like discourage people from thinking that they have to write a book. You don't. You do not have to. I do it if you want to, absolutely. But there are lots of, especially now, there's so many other mediums that you can get your story out there. And I think it's great that you have the self-awareness. You're like, no, I don't want to write a book, but you host an awesome podcast and you host a book club. So, you're still in the sober scene and you're giving back. And we need all different types of people to help spread the word.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that is really refreshing for my audience to hear, because it there are so many ways to give back. And in fact, my partner in the book club, she's a lawyer, and she was a former client, and we just started talking about, passion projects, and she wanted to do something in the sober space, and she didn't know exactly what it was. And I said, "Would you be interested in a book club? I'm looking for a partner." And it's just been so much fun and such a great experience to
Mm.
gather women, and ours is for women, gather women together in a place that builds community in a way that is maybe a little more lighthearted than feeling like you have to show up in a recovery space once a month or once a week. So we're having a lot of fun with that. So, Tawny, in addition to being an author, you also recently started a new venture. And I'm really excited to talk more about this, because the last time we talked, it wasn't yet out in the world. And your product is right in my wheelhouse, because as a functional nutritionist, I love this idea. So tell us about parentheses.
Yes, thank you so much, Terry. Yeah, so my husband and I just launched a non-alcoholic drink set called Parentheses. It's like I said, it's a set. It's 2 drinks. It's a before and after. So that's why we call it Parentheses. If you're listening and you're not watching, I'm holding up my hands like a set of parentheses. It's a before and an after. So like an aperitif, digestif. It's a vinegar-based botanical. My husband actually makes seaweed vinegar, and then we add the botanicals to the seaweed vinegar. And the before, we use herbs that are traditionally used to stimulate the senses, help prepare your mouth and body for a meal. And the after is we use herbs that are traditionally used to aid in digestion. And we launched it early December, and we're having a lot of fun with it. We're getting it into non-alcoholic bottle shops. We're doing online sales. We're doing tastings at trade shows, and the book and the drink, we launched them both around the same time on purpose so they can support one another. And it's been fun. It's been fun and and interesting to learn about the food and beverage space, because like I bartended, but I never sold a food and beverage product. And my husband was a sommelier who when he quit drinking, he got really into fermentation, and he started making vinegar. We also have an artisanal cooking vinegar line called Sour Humanoid, so that's for cooking, and then we have our drinking a vinegar drink that just came out. So yeah, that's and in the sake of transparency, in my newsletter, I'm also being very transparent about what it's like running a startup and how difficult it is. But also like fun stuff too, but it's also like people don't know the behind the scenes of starting a consumer packaged goods business. And I'm very real about it in my newsletter.
Yeah, I think I took the easy route, Tawny. I think I decided not to write a book, not to do a product, and so entrepreneurship has been a huge growth place for me. And the things that I put out in the world and the products that I create and the way that I engage with other people in this space is, there's a lot to learn and a lot that goes with it. But I think that writing a book and having an actual physical product are a whole nother level. And I love that you're, sharing about the behind the scenes of putting a product out there. Because it's another thing that I've had clients say, oh, I have this idea for a CBD drink, or, I want to create a product, what this looks like. And there's a lot to it.
Yeah. And I am so grateful to have a partner, it's my husband and I, but also my business partner like I said, he's a sommelier. He comes from food and beverage. He knows when he started the cooking vinegar brand, he learned a lot about the legislation and all the bureaucratic red tape that you have to go through getting your recipe approved by the Department of Agriculture. And like it's like, yeah, great. I love that you have an idea for a CBD drink. Here's all the stuff you have to do just to even get it approved for you to even try to sell it. And it's the kind of thing where it's like people want to write a book or think they want to write a book, but they want to have written a book.
Mhm.
It's the same thing. They want to have a drink or a food product, but they don't want to do the all the work to get to it, which is fair because it's a lot. It's a lot of work.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to hear that you also have an artisanal vinegar. And my oldest daughter is also a sommelier. And
Oh,
so,
cool.
yeah, it's really fun to have this kind of place where she has been able to bring a lot of non-alcoholic wines that her company has. They just go to her now. She's the go-to person because they say, we know you're like tapped into all of this and you have tasters, and so you take it, tell us what you think. And that's been really a fun connection. But vinegar is such an important part of our digestive health. And we can use it, I talk about it in my nutritional work, that we can use it as a digestive aid, that we can create better gut health through having fermented foods as part of our diet. And the idea of shrubs, where
Yes.
it's a drink with a vinegar base, is that some delicious options out there. So, are you finding that there's really anything else out there, Tawny, that is vinegar based in the non-alcoholic space?
So there are some non-alcoholic vinegar drinks, but what we're finding is that they're mostly apple cider vinegar based and not like we literally Nick makes the vinegar. Like he's not pouring a bottle of ACV and adding herbs to it. We have a commercial kitchen downtown here in Manhattan. We make he makes the vinegar. I want to be very clear. He's the reason why it tastes so good. I'm branding and marketing. So he makes the vinegar and then we add the herbs to it. It's seaweed vinegar. He makes seaweed vinegar and then we add the herbs. So there's so yeah, and then to answer your question, there's nothing like ours on the market in that realm, but that's also there, there's a lot of botanical spirits out there, but they usually use glycerin to extract the medicinal properties of the botanicals, where we use vinegar. So glycerin, it's going to be a sweeter product because of glycerin. So a lot of the NA drinks are sweet and carbonated. So we went the complete opposite route on purpose. We're like, we are a bitter, strong drink. It's a 1 ounce pour. It's a slow sipper. Um, we drink it straight or on the rocks. But a lot of people like to, if they don't want it as strong, mix it with some seltzer. We're working with some mixologists who are coming up with some recipes for us, and yeah, we're having a lot of fun with it.
I love that. And thank you for talking about the sugar content and how to actually use it, because that was kind of my next question, because people will purchase these beverages and then think, now what? And my mom has been so much, she's so fun. She's been like, she'll bring me things like a bitter that's a non-alcoholic bitters, or a drink that she sees. And she's like, I don't know what you're going to do with it. And I'm like, well, I'm not sure. Let me see what I have in the house. And, it's fun to play around with it. But I love the idea that you can just have it straight. And for me personally, I'm much more of a sour, savory type of flavor. And so I love
Mm-hmm.
the intensity of that. You do have some botanicals in there. So and I'm assuming they're both different, whether it's the aperitif or the digestive. What are some of these botanicals we can expect to taste?
Yeah, that's a whole other story of like I'll definitely tell you the botanicals, but I'll also give you a little behind the scenes.
Ah.
With the Department of Agriculture, there's something called the GRAS list, generally recognized as safe. So our recipe had to change several times because a couple of the herbs were not generally recognized as safe. We initially had Damiana and wormwood in our recipe, and we had to pull those out. So, but what we do use in the before, it's going to have more floral notes. So we have rose. There's some ashwagandha. There's also prickly ash, and prickly ash is a bitter herb, and it actually stimulates your salivary glands. It literally makes your mouth water, preparing your mouth for a meal. And there's this really funny experience that happens when people taste our drink for the first time. They're like, we hear repeatedly, I've never had something this strong since I quit drinking. Um, and then some people literally get tears in their eyes because it hits you. Like, and it's really wild. We were not expecting this. And then in the after, it's herbs that help aid in digestion and just have a calming property. So we've got chamomile, we've got lavender, and cardamom, and it's going to have more. So the before is more floral. The after is going to have more like smoky, woodsy notes to it. There's cherry bark, which another, like I said, we're using bitter herbs here on purpose. It's a like I said, it's a very slow sipper. You're not going to chug it. Like earlier we were talking about mindful and intentional dating and sex and relationships. I think our drink fits perfectly in line with that because it really is designed for you to have a small pour. You sniff it, you get all of the flavor notes, you take a slow sip, you talk about what you're tasting. We really want to create we really wanted to create a drink that we like to say it bookends a culinary experience. You have people over for dinner, you start them with the before, really gets their appetite ready, and then you end it with the after. And we think it can amplify your experience and stay more mindful.
Mm. You know what I love so much about this is that when we are foodies, like I consider myself a foodie, it's part of why I got into nutrition. And I come by it honestly. My mom is our original foodie. My daughter is a sommelier. She's done a lot of food and wine pairings and spirit pairings. And so we stopped drinking alcohol. And we think that, okay, well, I might be able to find a non-alcoholic wine, or I might be able to find some sort of mocktail that fills that gap. But when we're truly dialed into the whole experience, you have now brought us that very specific place where in a culinary experience, we would have a an aperitif. We would have something after. And so I love this that now we have options in the non-alcoholic space where it's enhancing all of that all along the way. Like people go to these really expensive, dining experiences, maybe where they have a wine pairing or they have a tasting, and so now we can bring in this experience into the dining, the drinking, and it just enhances what's out there. Like we are
Mhm.
not missing anything when we take alcohol out of the equation.
We're not. And it's kind of like I'm not vegan, but I often make this comparison of like when people are like, oh my God, you don't eat meat, then what do you eat? And it's like, there's so many other things to eat. There's so many vegetables that you just don't eat that are delicious. And it's the same kind of thing. It's like just because we're removing alcohol, there's still a lot of really interesting drinks out there. There's really interesting stuff, and when I was drinking alcohol, I had no interest in the other drinks. And I will say the non-alcoholic drinks are obviously better now. There's so many yummy beers and wines and cordials, and um, there's other aperitif digestifs that are out there. And th- when I quit drinking, it was O'Doul's or seltzer. So
Yeah, and you've been alcohol free how long now, Tony?
since November 30th of 2015.
Oh, yeah. Okay, we're really close. Mine was October 18th of 2015.
Oh my God. Okay. I love that. Yeah, that was a good year for us, huh?
It was a great year. Oh my gosh, everything opened up on the other side. Well, I would say the first 6 months were a little rocky.
Well, yeah, that's another like, since we're being transparent about the realities of writing a book and launching a business, the first year of getting sober is really messy and confusing and scary and enlightening and liberating. And it's just it's a lot of work, and it is 100% worth it.
Mm. Well, and I love okay, so this is what came to mind when you said that. It's a lot of work, but by having a book like Dry Humping and having these conversations and having a offering in the world so that you can show up and bring a delicious drink and share it with people, it makes that first year even easier.
Thank you for saying that. And again, when we quit drinking, there was only what, like two podcasts. The only quitlet that was out there was memoir. Now we're seeing more specific books like mine about relationships and Brooke's book about nutrition. We're going to see more of these hyper focused quitlet books, I think, that are like, yes, you quit drinking. Now what? Like, I removed this thing from my life. How do I date? How do I eat in a healthy way? How do I take care of myself? And now there's so many different podcasts. There's just so many more resources out there, better drinks, podcasts, books, all of this stuff that, when you and I quit drinking, that's when blogging was still super big. I had a blog, and there was maybe like 10 of us on Instagram posting about it. So,
I didn't even think about getting resources. I thought I might have to go to meetings, which in my case meant AA. And other than that, I had no concept that there was different options. In hindsight, I could have done some research, but I literally, decided that the decision to not drink, then once I decided no more drinking, I didn't have to waste the time and energy of my thoughts and moderating and all of the noise. I was able to move
Yeah.
into something that I wanted to focus on. And so that's when I went to nutrition school about 3 months after I was
Mm.
drinking. And I realized that I stumbled upon, or the universe delivered, this perfect opportunity for me to move into what I now consider kind of one of the tenets of creating an alcohol free life. Like you said, writing a book and having a book out in the world is very different. I think about becoming alcohol free and living alcohol
Mm.
free are also quite different.
That's a really good point. And, I would even argue that like quitting drinking or even just reevaluating your relationship with alcohol is the quote unquote easy part. It's learning how to do everything all over again. I wasn't expecting that. I really wasn't. I thought I'm going to quit drinking and everything's just going to kind of work out and I'm going to keep doing the same stuff. And then you don't want to do the same stuff. And, you figure out who your real friends are versus your drinking buddies. You figure out what you want your sex and dating life to be like. You figure out, God, I want to become a nutritionist. You have we have these huge life changes, and it's because we stopped drinking, like this really small thing just all we did was stop drinking. If you think about it, and
Mhm.
then all of this other stuff happened because we worked for it. We worked really hard for it and we still work really hard for it.
Yeah, let's talk about the working part for a moment, Tawny, because what's been bubbling up in conversations I've been having recently, and a potential client mentioned this phrase in our call yesterday, and he called it recovery fatigue. And I think that there's so much. I love learning. I consider myself a lifelong learner. Like, I wanna
Mhm.
keep doing all of this stuff, but I also don't wanna be fixated on recovery. I wanna be liberated to live my life as it looks now. What are your thoughts on that?
I love this question so much because I feel the same way. Even just, I don't want to be pigeonholed as the sober sexpert.
Mm.
I I I am glad I wrote this book and I love talking about relationships and empowering people to stop relying on liquid courage. But there's also like I don't want to only write about recovery. I don't want to only write about mental health, which is again why writing that postpartum piece was really good for me because I wrote about writing. um and even launching this drink has been really great for me because it's not about mental health. It's not even about sobriety. It's just like, here is this physical product. Would you like to buy it? you know? And I think I really needed that because as you know, working in the mental health space is a lot. Um, and I don't want to be defined just by because I don't drink. Like it's a pretty small part of my life. It's not drinking alcohol. Like even though I'm almost like 8.5 years sober, alcohol is still like a huge part of my life because I talk about not drinking it. Um, and I've been doing that for over 8 years now. So I have no idea what my next topic will be. But I feel you and I hear you loud and clear. And I'm glad that you brought that up because it can feel like I've hesitated on even talking about that because I don't want to sound like ungrateful or anything like that. Um, I'm grateful that I've, became quote unquote the sober sexpert and I got a book deal and I'm grateful for all the work that I have. And I want to write about other stuff.
Yeah, well, here's what I've noticed in my own journey is that I started out having a conversation about better nutrition because that's where I was at. And then I wove in the conversation like the key to better nutrition is to stop drinking. And then I started talking to people about how you do the early part of not drinking. And then I started talking about what comes next. And
Mhm.
now I'm really enjoying conversations around midlife and what is bubbling up and possible and how we continue growing and thriving in our 60s and beyond. It's such a fun place to be, meeting all kinds of, women who are in this same place. Some of it's messy, some of it's empowering. It's exactly where my life is headed. And so I think, Tawny, that one of the most beautiful things we can do as humans is share our journey in real time and invite people into this conversation. And that to me goes far beyond the
Mm,
identity of not drinking alcohol.
mm. I'm snapping. That's it. Standing ovation right here for Terry.
Yeah, well, thank you because I do. I want to have conversations that are deeper. And I've been telling this analogy lately, and people talk about we're doing a lot of work with one particular group around identity and who do you think you are? And I ask them, well, who do you think you are? And I say to people sometimes, I used to be 15. And I can remember being 15, and there were some parts that were good about 15, but I don't imagine I'm gonna go back to being 15. I don't long for being 15.
Mm,
I have empathy for 15-year-olds. I have compassion for 15-year-olds. I have some understanding of it, but that's just not where I am anymore. And I'm
mm.
not going to hold onto it with so much power. In fact, what I want people to do is open up and expand around this new identity.
I love that so much, and it actually reminds me of a friend of mine who owns a gym here in New York, and she recently had a similar revelation where she was like, "I've been trying, like busting my ass trying to get registration back to pre-COVID numbers, and I had to finally realize everything's different now. I can't compare the gym now to the way it ran in 2019. It's 2024. How is the gym going to run today?" And that just seems so in line with what you just said of like, yeah, that it's good to know how you did things 5 years ago, but how are you going to do things today?
Yeah, and I think it's the most beautiful part of this journey is that we get to keep evolving. And when I was drinking and over drinking, I had some idea that I wanted to do more with my life, that I had a voice somewhere, but I didn't trust myself enough to use it. And so
Mm.
it's so much fun and such a blessing to be able to be in this place and have these rich conversations like this, Tawny, and recognize and applaud the work that you do in the world. So thank you.
And you as well. And to anyone listening, I think it's just, I think this conversation really speaks to the power of, women taking a stand for themselves, for our mental health, for our careers, for our relationships, and saying we deserve better. We deserve a life that we are in control of rather than life just happening to us. And for us, that meant removing alcohol and addressing why we drank in the first place, but I would hope anyone listening can, maybe that could be the takeaway of just like what subtle shifts can you make in your life to honor yourself, to use your voice, to get in touch with your real courage, not liquid courage. What's that thing you've always wanted to do one day? You know, do it. Do it. Just
Don't
like
wait. Don't wait.
just do
Yeah.
it. I saw this beautiful meme. It was like on one side it was this person like daydreaming and it said one day, and then on the other side it said day one, and it was her actually doing the thing. And I just thought that subtle shift of like you're not just going to all of a sudden have a book written. You have to open up Google Docs. You have to write a whole bunch of like really horrible drafts, and find an agent and then write a proposal. Like there's just so many steps. And like we said at the beginning, I faced so much rejection. I had so many no's. So many people passed on this book, but I had one editor who really believed in it. And that's all you need. You need that one yes.
Mm. Yeah, thank you for that. Oh, so exciting. Well, thank you again so much for being here and sharing your journey. What's next for Tawny?
That's a great question, Terry. Right now, you know, amongst all of the madness, my husband, we got married. Like,
You said husband, and I was like, ooh,
yeah,
new word.
it is a new word. So it's like, book came out September 19th. We got married. We just went to the courthouse October 18th. Um, and so, I'm really just trying to stop being obsessed with work and just enjoy being a human, being married, having the cutest puppy in the world. And, I guess that's a long-winded way of saying work-life balance.
Well, and you know what I hear in your tone too is this beautiful place of reflection and gratitude and presence and exploring what does it feel like to just revel in the creative process of what I've created and enjoy.
Yes. Yes, that's it, is like I don't know what my next book is gonna be. No freaking clue, and I don't care. Like I'm really excited about the drink, and I've also learned that by not filling up my calendar and not filling up my plate, I'm seeing what comes my way. What's good, instead of me like putting myself out there so much. I've put myself out there for years. Like, let's see what comes to me. And that's really holding space for some interesting new projects.
Oh, I love that. One of my a couple of years ago, my word of the year was allow.
Ooh, I like that.
It was tough. I didn't like it. I was like, no, any other word. Like I want to control things. I don't want to allow.
Girl.
What a beautiful place to recognize, like, oh, there is this beautiful tension in life where we push and we step back and we expand and we wait. And the pause, it brings me to your bookend of your parentheses. And it's a beautiful place to be right now for you. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, Terry. This is great chatting with you.
I want to thank you for tuning in to the Sober Edge podcast. This is a place for important conversations and a safe place to question everything you thought you knew about drinking. If you're looking for your sober edge, I want to invite you to connect with me at thesobernutritionist.com, where you can grab my free resource, Becoming More, a guide to loving your sober life. And I would be so grateful if you enjoyed this podcast, if you would leave a rating and review, as it will help more people find their sober edge.